There is a specific kind of quiet that lives in the bodies of certain adults. It's not peace. It is a coiled, humming tension in your shoulders. It's the apology in your posture as you walk into a room. The subconscious belief that you must shrink yourself to be acceptable. It's the phantom feeling of taking up too much space, wanting too much, being too much, even when you are silent. You might be a leader, a creator, a beloved friend, but in the most unguarded moments of your own mind, you feel like a ghost, an imposter, who has one wrong, move away from being discovered and dismissed. If this feeling resonates in your bones, then you understand that this is not a simple personality quirk, or a case of low self-esteem. It is a fundamental architecture. It is a psychological blueprint for your entire being, designed not with strong foundations, but with absences. It is the legacy of the child who was not abused, not beaten, but was simply unseen. And the devastating truth is that the human nervous system often cannot tell the difference between a direct attack and a complete lack of response. To a child whose very survival depends on connection, being consistently ignored is not a void. It is a profound and terrifying threat. It feels like a quiet erasure of the self. This is the story of that erasure, and more importantly, the story of how you, as an adult, can become the architect of your own reconstruction. We are not here to lay blame on parents, who are often fighting their own unseen battles, drowning in stress, or passing down a legacy of neglect they themselves inherited. We are here to decode the brilliant, heartbreaking, and ultimately transformative psychology of the child who learned to survive in silence, so that you can finally give yourself permission to exist out loud. Let's call this phenomenon the architecture of absence. It's not something you chose. It was built for you, brick by invisible brick, in the countless moments where your bid for connection was met with the void. Every time you ran to show off a drawing and were met with a distracted, "That is nice, honey." Every question that hung unanswered in the air. Every time you were sad or scared and had to soothe yourself because no one noticed your tears. These weren't singular, traumatic events. They were a slow, persistent erosion, a death by 1,000 paper cuts to your budding sense of self-worth. From a neurobiological standpoint, what was happening was profound. Your brain, wired for attachment, interpreted this chronic lack of feedback as a sign that you were unsafe in your environment. The stress hormone, cortisol, would subtly drip into your system, not in huge bursts from a clear and present danger, but in a low, constant hum. This didn't just make you anxious, it remodeled your developing nervous system. It taught your body that the world is a place where your needs will not be met, where your excitement is an inconvenience, and where your pain is a burden. And so, your brain, in its incredible adaptive intelligence, began to construct a survival strategy. It built an entire personality structure, not on the solid ground of being loved, but on the shifting sands of being ignored. This architectural strategy is built on 3 massive, effortful pillars. At first glance, they look like strengths. Society might even reward you for them. But they are coping mechanisms, and they are exhausting to maintain. The first is the fortress of hyper-independence. The unseen child learns a core lesson with devastating clarity. To need someone is to be disappointed. To rely on someone is to risk abandonment. The only person I can truly count on is myself. And so, you built a fortress around your heart. The employee who takes on every project, the partner who handles everything. But inside the walls of that fortress, you are profoundly lonely. Admitting you are struggling feels like a catastrophic failure. The words, "I need you," feel impossible to speak. Because in your bones, you believe they are the words that make people leave. To be independent is your armor, but it is also your prison, isolating you from the genuine, reciprocal connection you crave more than anything. The second pillar is the altar of perfection. If simple existence doesn't grant you acknowledgement, then perhaps the child's logic goes, extraordinary existence will. Your life becomes a relentless performance, an offering at the altar of validation. You chase achievements, accolades, the perfect body, the perfect career, the perfect family. You believe that if you can just become flawless, unimpeachable, and impressive enough, someone will finally turn to you and give you the round of applause you've been waiting for your whole life. But here is the cruel twist. It never works. Even when you succeed, it feels hollow. You are immediately haunted by the imposter syndrome, a high priest at your altar whispering that it was all a fluke, that you don't deserve it, and that soon everyone will see the real, unworthy you. You cannot internalize your victories because they were never for you. They were a desperate attempt to fill a void that can't be filled from the outside. And the third pillar, perhaps the most insidious, is the camouflage of people-pleasing. The child who is ignored learns that their own feelings, needs, and desires are problematic. They create tension. They are inconvenient. So, you develop an astonishing ability to erase yourself. You become an emotional chameleon, a master at sensing the moods and expectations of others and mirroring them back perfectly. You become the easygoing friend who is fine with anything. You become the partner who loses their own hobbies, interests, and even opinions, absorbing those of your significant other. The core problem here is not just that you suppress your needs. It is that, after a lifetime of doing so, you may no longer know what they are. You look inside for your sense of self, for what you truly want, and you find a blur. This is the ultimate cost of invisibility. You become invisible even to yourself. You were never given the reflection, a mirroring from a parent that affirms "I see you," and what you feel is real. Without that mirror, your own identity remains fragile, poorly lit, and heartbreakingly uncertain. These three pillars, the fortress, the altar, and the camouflage, cast long, dark shadows into your adult life. In romantic relationships, you are caught in a gravitational pull towards what is familiar. You might find yourself repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable or neglectful partners, unconsciously restaging the original scene of your wounding, hoping this time you can finally get it right and earn their love. Conversely, when you do encounter someone who is kind, present, and consistent, it can feel overwhelmingly intense and deeply unsettling. Their attention feels like a spotlight you don't know how to stand in, and your inner systems scream, "It is a trap." Trusting genuine love can feel more dangerous than craving a familiar absence. This trauma is also somatic. It lives in your body. It is the persistent clenching in your jaw, the tight knot between your shoulder blades, the shallow breathing when you are stressed. Your body is still living in a state of low-grade alert, unable to fully power down and believe in its own safety. It is the body keeping a score that your conscious mind may have long forgotten. And internally, there is the voice of the inner critic. This is not your voice. It is the internalized echo of the silence, a phantom voice that fills the void with harsh judgment. Its job is protective in a twisted way. It criticizes you before anyone else can, believing it can soften the blow of external rejection by getting there first. It is the voice tirelessly whispering that you're not good enough, that you're a burden, that you said the wrong thing. It is the warden of your emotional prison. So given this deep, complex architecture, where does freedom begin? It begins not with a wrecking ball, but with the quiet act of turning on a light in a room that has been dark for decades. The healing journey is a process of demolition and reconstruction, and it happens in stages. The first and most crucial stage is bearing witness. You must allow yourself to see the blueprint clearly. This means giving yourself permission to grieve the foundation you never had. This is not self-pity. This is a courageous acknowledgement of a legitimate and profound loss. You must say to yourself, either in a journal, to a therapist, or quietly to your own heart, "What I went through was real. It may not have had a name, and it may not have left visible scars, but it shaped me. My pain is valid. My feelings of invisibility were a rational response to my environment." This act of self-validation is radical, because it is the very thing you were always denied. You are finally, after all these years, telling that unseen child, "I see you." The second stage is deconstruction. This is where you begin the slow, deliberate work of defying the old, faulty programming, with small, consistent acts of rebellion. You must challenge the pillars that have held you up, but also kept you captive. Against the fortress of hyper-independence, you practice the terrifying skill of Sindai asking, "Start small. Could you grab me a glass of water? Can you listen to me vent for 5 minutes? I am feeling overwhelmed. Can we talk?" Every time you ask for help and it is given, you are laying down a new neural pathway. You are teaching your nervous system, ounce by ounce, that connection can be safe, and reliance can be a relief. Against the altar of perfection, you practice the art of good enough. Deliberately hand in a project that is 80% perfect. Let a typo exist in an email. Allow yourself to be a beginner at something and to be bad at it. And most importantly, you practice celebrating your effort, not just the outcome. You did the thing. That, in itself, is the victory. Against the camouflage of people-pleasing, you practice expressing low-stakes desires. When a friend asks where you want to eat, have an opinion. I am in the mood for Thai. Say no to a small request without a convoluted excuse. I am sorry, I can't this weekend. You are sending a message to your own subconscious. My preferences matter. My energy is finite and valuable. I exist. The third and most transformative stage is beginning the process of reparenting. You become the attentive, compassionate parent that your inner child always needed. When the inner critic pipes up, you don't fight it. You address it with the kindness of a parent speaking to a scared child. You say, "Thank you for trying to protect me. I understand you are afraid, but I've got this now. We are safe." You learn to offer yourself the compassion you so freely give to others. When you make a mistake, instead of berating yourself, you whisper, "It is okay. You are human. You are allowed to be imperfect." This is a profound recalibration of your internal emotional landscape. And this leads to the final, beautiful reclamation. That hyper-awareness, that incredible empathy you developed as a survival skill. It does not have to disappear. Healing is not about becoming less sensitive. It is about finally turning that powerful lens of perception around and pointing it at yourself. It is about using your deep attunement to understand your own needs, your own emotions, your own boundaries. Your empathy ceases to be a draining liability and becomes a conscious, well-aimed superpower. You no longer just understand the unspoken pain of others. You understand, honor, and respond to your own. The architecture of absence is not your destiny. It is your history. It explains why you've struggled, why you felt so alone, and why your strengths are double-edged swords. But you are no longer the powerless child living in the silence. You are the adult with the blueprints in your hand. The reconstruction of a self is slow, patient work. It is done with small acts of courage, with oceans of self-compassion, and with the growing belief that your existence requires no justification. You were not a ghost then, and you are not a ghost now. You were simply an unheard song, waiting for an audience, and that audience is finally here. It is you. Let the music play.